And thank you very much to Matt Cox from the lottery, who is now going to give you his presentation. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Corella. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here and for your interest in finding out a little more about the National Lottery Community Fund and how we might be able to help you with funding. I was supposed to be not here today. My colleague Sarah Kent, who is another of our local funding officers in Northamptonshire, should have been here, but unfortunately she's a little unwell. So the two of us are responsible, as it were, for the county of Northamptonshire. And I have a little presentation here which is going to be about what the fund does in general rather than specifically about Northamptonshire, but it's the same wherever people might be within England. As regards Sarah and my roles as local funding officers, we are effectively your local representatives within the community fund. What that means is that we live relatively locally. I must admit, I live just over the border in Warwickshire, but I do have responsibility for South Warwickshire as part of my role as well. So I am still living within my relevant patch. But I then have the responsibility for, conveniently now, we've got the unitary authorities, what is now West Northamptonshire, and Sarah has responsibility for the new North Northamptonshire. She lives in Northamptonshire herself, but both of us are happy when the time comes for us to be able to get back out on the road, to come and visit people, to see projects, talk about services and organisations, and be a little bit more present. But as your local representatives, we can be points of contact for you when you wish to talk about ideas that you may want funding for. We would be the people at this end who would be most likely to be those, depending on workload, who would carry any applications through our assessment process for you, present those to our decision makers on your behalf. We would, if a grant is awarded, then be those people who actually, from our perspective, manage that grant on your behalf and that live project process. As I say, hopefully come out and see you, see what you're up to, and so on. So I have a little PowerPoint, so I'm going to share my screen, and we'll be wanting this one here. If somebody can just confirm that that is visible, that would be great.
Yes, that's fine, Matt.
Splendid. Okay, now what I realised I didn't do before is actually full screen it into a presentation, if that works whilst sharing. How does that look? Is that all right?
Yes, that's
okay,
fine.
Good stuff. Anyway, there we are. National Lottery Community Fund. Worth mentioning that up until 2.5 years ago, we were called the Big Lottery Fund, and it may well be that there are people who are still more familiar with that name. Big Lottery Fund had, I think, quite a presence in people's minds. It was considerably easier to say and remember than the National Lottery Community Fund. However, there was a reason for the change, and that was that as an organisation, there was a sense that we wanted to make the links to where the money comes from clearer. So we obviously receive our money from the sales of National Lottery tickets. We are therefore the National Lottery Community Fund. And this is a little bit of information regarding, can I just ask, sorry, are you seeing the next slide bit on the right?
On the right hand side, yeah.
Yeah, what's happened there? We don't need that, do we?
If you go back into the slideshow at the beginning again, and I think you just,
I may just leave it like that.
Yeah.
A weird bit at the top. Sorry, this is not how we want it. Let's just leave it like that.
Slideshow on the grey bar. If you click that, and it will go straight into it. Oh, where are you? So file home.
It's doing that again. I'm gonna not bother with slideshow. I'm just going to do it the way I did it, like this. So we are, as a lottery money distributor, a non-departmental public body, and we are accountable to government. We are effectively overseen by DCMS. We receive 56p from every lottery ticket. Good causes receive 56p from every lottery ticket, and there are 4 distributors that are responsible for putting that money out there, and I'm sure you'll be aware of all of them. But we have Sport England, obviously handling more sports related activities and applications, the Arts Council, dealing with obviously the arts side of things, the Heritage Lottery Fund, dealing with heritage, and the Community Fund, which is obviously working with communities and organisations that support communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about what exactly we are meaning by that in a moment. There are the figures there about the amounts of money that come from lottery tickets into these good causes, but the Community Fund itself distributes about £600 million a year across the whole of the UK, which is a not insubstantial amount. And our purpose as the Community Fund is, as I say, to support communities and those organisations that are working within those communities and helping to support them equally. Very simple, quite a broad remit, and I imagine every one of you is in some way involved in something that absolutely fits that bill. The Community Fund has two primary funding streams, the small grants and the large grants. Awards for All is very well known. That is grants up to £10,000. Smallest grant they can award is £300. The small and large grants schemes have no deadlines for applications. They are constantly rolling. Applications can come in at any time. However, with Awards for All, you can only have one application made within a 12-month period. And if you are then awarded monies, you cannot apply again until those monies are spent. And you could be applying actually for only 1 day's worth of activity, or you could be applying for something that might actually last for the full 365 days, running a service on every one of those days, but you'd still be bound by that only one application in a year. It's a relatively quick turnaround. It can take still up to 3 months, which doesn't sound very quick, but it's a very simple process. As it says there, you only need to answer one question. We local funding officers work on the larger grants, so I don't actually know what that one question is, but it will be simply asking you to tell them about the project that you are looking to have funded. The larger grants, which I as a local funding officer work on, they're called Reaching Communities. Partnerships is mentioned here as well. The two things are pretty much the same in what they can do and how they work. Basically, Reaching Communities is an individual organisation doing something. A partnerships grant we would consider where more than one organisation is working in partnership, and where both of those organisations, or the various of the organisations within that partnership, are each going to be receiving a proportion of the grant and spending a proportion of that grant. Otherwise, as I say, the two things are pretty much the same thing. We start where Awards for All leaves off, so grants from £10,000 upwards. There is no upper limit, but we do have a maximum grant period of 5 years. You can apply for an over £10,000 grant for less than a year. We've been doing sort of 6-month grants recently for some emergency responses to the pandemic, but generally people do work in full year periods, so usually 1 up to 5 years, whatever might be right for what you're doing. Again, no deadlines, so you can apply at any time. We do prefer that applications come to us through our web portal, not least from an administration point of view. The questions that you ask within that, make sure that obviously you've answered the sort of things that we need to know, but also it pre-populates our internal system so that we don't have to try and shove into our boxes the text that you provided us with. However, we appreciate that many organisations or individuals may not have the capacity to apply through the web portal, so we are happy to accept applications by other means. We say that you could record a video and just send in a video with your request for funding, your idea about what you'd like funding for. You could just send something in an email rather than having to fill the form in, but it does help us to come through the website. We have always been very much about funding projects, something that you are doing in response to something that may be required or something that may be happening locally. And we still very much are interested in projects and the delivery of those. However, not least in response to the pandemic, we are now willing to consider funding an organisation's core costs effectively, that we have that desire to want to ensure that organisations that we feel are providing the right sort of services for us to be supportive of them, we're happy to fund those organisations effectively to continue to exist where they're having difficulties with income and their revenue streams, to be able to continue to provide the service they're providing. We can look at supporting an organisation to develop in some way, so we can award some money to assist with some sort of internal reorganisation, or ways at looking at how an organisation may be able to develop to better provide a service or to grow in some ways. And we also can fund capital costs, so work to land or to buildings, provided it fits within our community remit, which we'll go on to in a moment. We do have additional requirements with capital costs relating to ownership, and obviously if we are putting money into buildings, into there'll be an interest in that bit of land or that building for years into the future. So there are additional requirements that we'd always go through with you if you were coming to us for capital costs. I will say that at the moment, again, due to the pandemic more than anything, we are finding ourselves very we have huge numbers of applications coming in, and a lot of those remain responses to the pandemic and organisations working at a very essential level with people to ensure they have roofs over their heads, to ensure they have food on the table, and to unfortunately to deal with the increase in abuse that has been suffered by many people with the lockdowns. And therefore some of the capital projects we're seeing at the moment, particularly large capital requests, are a little bit more difficult for us to support right now, because we just don't have the funding available to help with some of those. However, we do appreciate that community buildings remain essential, and as we hopefully are better able to get out into our communities and to come together again within buildings, that they actually will be incredibly important for those communities. So it's a difficult balance for us being able to support those very important spaces whilst also ensuring that people are being helped to live the best lives they can. We'll take every application on its merits, but I just think it's worth saying that some of those larger capital projects perhaps are not going to do so well at this particular time. These are the key things that we are looking for with what we look to support, and the first and third of these are things that are discussed in detail with every application that we receive when decisions are being made. In the middle there, the strengths-based one, this is to appreciate that what we're looking to fund is based on what the strengths might be within the community and how those can be assisted to be even greater strengthened, building on what is already there. But the other two, as I say, very important. We want to see that the projects or services that we are supporting are led by people, potentially actually by the beneficiaries themselves. We want to know that what is being proposed has come effectively from the ground up, where an organisation, for example, says, we have identified there's this issue, we know we're well placed to deal with that issue, we're going to go in there and we're going to help people with that issue. That is more top down and is less what we are looking to see. We want to feel that this is being done, or this is happening because the people want this to happen and have sought it out, perhaps, are there driving it, are involved in consultation, are there in helping with the delivery of it potentially. So that being led by people in the lead, we are looking for that very, very much within the applications that we are assessing. And the connected element, we really want to feel that the applications we are seeing know how they fit within their local community and perhaps the wider community, know the other things that are going on, know how they are complementing those, are talking to the right other organisations, are referring to or receiving referrals from the right sort of organisations. That connectivity is very important. Possibly worth mentioning that, understandably and quite rightly and fantastically, through the past 18 months, there have been so many grassroots organisations springing up that have addressed very local needs, often related to food, because that is a very clear need that people have identified in a very local area. And of course, as soon as an organisation begins to put those feelers out and get involved in its local community, it discovers that there are other things that people are being affected by, other issues that they're facing, and feels, because they're already there and helping those people out, that they're therefore well placed to then perhaps do some more and perhaps do some more. And that is understandable and fantastic, that support that people have been giving to each other. However, what we do then find, to some extent, and in some cases to a very clear extent, is that there are little groups doing exactly the same thing, almost in adjoining streets. And because they've been so focused, understandably, again, in what they're doing, they haven't had the opportunity to, and perhaps haven't even thought about the wider picture of what's going on. And in some cases, groups are beginning to deliver things that actually were already being delivered by perhaps more well-placed organisations who they could perhaps be working alongside or referring to, because that other organisation has the right processes and policies in place that make them more suited to delivery of whatever it might be. So that connectedness is something that is very important, and perhaps right now more so than ever before. Moving on. These are our priorities. So those three things we just talked about are what we look to see in an application. But these are the things that whatever's being delivered has to meet at least one of. So many things we look at actually meet all three of these, but we're looking at projects or services that bring people together. We're looking at projects that are related to places that are important to people, and it mentions an online network there. This does not need to be a physical space. It doesn't need to be a community centre or a recreational space. This could be, and of course, again, the pandemic, with everything happening virtually, as we are doing now, this is a place that would matter to people potentially. So there's more to it than just the physical. And then also projects that are helping people to fulfill their potential, getting in as early as possible to ensure that people have the best chances in life. So as long as one of those is being met, you will be eligible. If none of those are being met, it is an ineligible project for us. Just in relation to the pandemic, this is ongoing. We're still seeing emergency projects coming in, and obviously as restrictions do ease, perhaps a little bit later than many of us might have hoped, there are those additional issues that may come to the fore of people who have been isolated for so long, struggling with being able to then come back out into society. So we're still wanting to help as best we can with the responses to the pandemic, and as I say, as a result of the fact that there is still so much of that going on, there is an element of that becoming a core part of what we're doing, and funding therefore not being as available as it has in the past for some of the things that we would have been more involved with previously. That's not moved on. Here we go. Organisations that can apply. Oh, there we are. Now it's caught up with itself. Let's go back up. Basically, if you're a charity or a not-for-profit organisation registered as a company but without any profitable element, then you're probably eligible. These lists are on our website. We can always talk to you about the specifics of your organisation. Obviously, I had a question yesterday from somebody saying, is it okay if we are raising money, but that money is going back into what we do? Then absolutely, yes, that's fine. It's about making a profit, and that profit just going into pockets perhaps of shareholders or of directors. So that wouldn't be something that we could get involved with. But if it's not actually turning a profit and hanging on to that cash, then you're probably eligible. There do need to be at least 2 directors or trustees leading that organisation, and they cannot be related or in a relationship or sharing an address. So that constitutional requirement is there as well. As I say, that's all on the website, and I'll show you when I've been through this exactly what you can find on our website as well. So if you're applying, unlike Awards for All, which is just the one question, there are a series of questions, but these are all things that I'm sure most organisations who are likely to apply would already be thinking about. If they're not, then clearly they're going to be things that you do need to be thinking about. But it's very simple. And as well as changing our name a couple of years ago and actually putting in place the local funding officers like myself and Sarah in Northamptonshire, we also moved to a much less onerous application process for people. We still work in 2 stages, but we make the initial element considerably lighter weight. You just need to tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do. We'll ask you further questions if we feel we need to know a little bit more about it, but we want you to do as little work as possible up front, because the last thing we want is somebody spending days upon days putting together a 50-page document to tell us about their project when it's something that isn't actually going to go anywhere. So we want you to do as little work as possible, but as long as you can answer these things, which if you're going to apply for funding you ought to be able to do, then we're off to a flying start. My apologies, my screen's moving on so slowly today. And then we'll review that initial application. As I say, ask some more questions if we feel we need to, just to make sure we feel confident as your local representatives that we can present it on your behalf in a coherent way. And a panel will decide whether that's something that is more or less likely to receive funding. And if we feel it's something that fits well with what we're able to support at this time, we will ask you to provide some more information. So this is effectively like the old stage 2, but again, you don't have to fill in an application form. We're not expecting you to repeat anything you've already told us. You just fill in the gaps, which give us a bit more detail, make sure we know about your financial situation and the budget in more detail. And it's, again, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Every application obviously is different, so every bit of information we need might be different. We work with everybody on a case-by-case basis and make sure hopefully that the experience is as beneficial for you as possible and as easy for you as possible. Do mention now that we require organisations to have the right level of safeguarding policies in place, dependent on the sort of work that they are doing. This again is something that is particularly pertinent now. Those smaller organisations I was mentioning that have been working in very local areas during the pandemic, many of them have realised that they can help people out with perhaps a bit of DIY around their house, for example. We are only going to feel confident in supporting an organisation if we know that if they're doing that sort of thing, then they've got the right sort of policies and understandings, and their staff and volunteers are aware of those and working to those, to feel that it's the right thing to do to support that organisation to be involved in people's lives in the way that perhaps they are intending to be. So just worth bearing in mind that a safeguarding policy is very important to us now, but obviously for your own benefits, to ensure that your staff members and volunteers have the safeguarding in place for themselves, not just for the beneficiaries, is important for you as an organisation. The fun thing is I can never remember what's coming next, so I can't even get ahead of myself as it's taking ages to move on. Obviously, if we say, yes, here you go, have a grant, you get an offer letter. You have 6 months in which to start it from the point at which we've offered it. And as you would expect, we would want to know how it's going. We want to check in with you. As I say, if we're able to come out and visit you as the project is live, We do ask for reports dependent on the level of funding, the type of project. It may be more frequently than annually, but at least annually we want to know about what's going on. And we used to be very much about your outputs and your outcomes, and asking people to report back on those and how well they've hit their targets and so on. We're far less interested in that now. We just need to feel that what you're doing is in the spirit of what the grant was awarded to do, and that it's being spent on eligible expenditure. So there have been so many organisations, again, particularly over the past year, who have somewhat redirected how they've been operating, because they have established that what people need is a little different from what they were delivering prior to the pandemic. But even irrespective of the pandemic, sometimes you'll have a grant to do something, and a year down the line you realise that actually you're learning that what your beneficiaries need is perhaps a little different from what was set out initially. Provided you keep in touch with us and talk to us, we are more than likely to say, well, that's fine, as long as you advise us how things have changed, as long as we can understand how that budget's being spent, go for it. Spend that money the way that your beneficiaries need it to be spent, and we'll be very happy with that. So it's a lot more relaxed, a lot more conversational, our relationship with applicants and grant holders these days, and hopefully, as a result of that, a lot better for all parties. So just to finish off with this, I'll show you the website in a second, but all of that information really is there on the website. We do have an advice line, particularly useful if you want to talk to somebody about the awards for all side of things, because we local funding officers are not involved with that, although general questions about what the fund can and can't do are pretty much the same across both the small and large grant schemes. But 02895680143 is the advice line, and they can put you in touch with somebody who can help you. Redirected to somebody like myself. If you do want to get in touch with me, my email is there. It's matthew.cox@tnlcommunityfund.org.uk. Obviously, I can take some questions in a moment, but it may well be that if you've got something that you want to talk about that may be quite specific to your service or your project idea, that it may be better for you to come to me directly rather than us sort of having a conversation about it with everybody on the call today. That then is the end of the presentation. I will stop sharing my screen for a second and then reshare just with the website, which is there. So this is moving slower and slower, probably as the heat begins to take it over. I mean, that would be the website, but now it's just a white screen. Okay, if that doesn't load in a moment, I have to give up.
I can probably do it for you, Matt.
Well, here we are. It's trying.
Yeah, it's trying.
Okay, so so this is the home page on our website, and right there, clear as day. Apply for funding under 10,000. Apply for funding over 10,000. So you can click straight through onto one of those. It does beneath those have more information about what we as an organisation are out to do. But if, for example, I click on the apply for funding over £10,000, click on that. We are in England, so it's worth clicking on that one. And it gives you the programmes for, and obviously we're over £10,000, so we're not looking at awards for all here. We've got reaching communities here and partnerships. As I say, that's pretty much the same thing, but just if you've got more than one organisation working together. What you do see is there's something else here, and there are also some UK-wide, now I can't get it to scroll, things down here as well. This is because the fund does from time to time have some strategic funds that it opens up for particular, to respond to particular things. So we've had funds focused on buildings, we've had funds focused on climate action, we've had funds for women and girls projects, for young people's projects. At the moment, we have the I Will Fund, which I'm going to be completely honest about and say I don't know too much about, but it's another funding availability through us. The government sometimes has additional money, sometimes from dormant bank accounts, that comes our way, and we're able to provide more than just our standard funding streams. But if what I was just going to do was click into Reaching Communities, which is the most likely large grant scheme that you'd be looking at, and it immediately gives you a bit more information about it, who can apply, what we can fund, what you can spend it on, what those questions there, what we're going to ask you about in the application. You can just click on apply online and off you go. And that then covers pretty much everything that I've given you today. So it's all there for you to have a look at in your own time as well. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Matt. So have people got questions?
Yes, good question about how long does the application process take. So there's the two stages, as I say, and we do say to applicants that they should allow 12 weeks for each of those two sections. So it could be a 6-month process. It can be quicker, it can be longer, and that would generally depend on the sort of the level of information that we have and how confident we are in being able to move forward with that information that we've got. It also is always going to be somewhat dependent on the amount of applications that are coming in, just the individual workloads that we are all dealing with. We do have, so the initial reviews at that first stage with the lesser amount of information, we have 2 of those generally each month. So there's always another one round the corner. We have a decision meeting once every month, although sometimes as we come towards the end of the year, we might stick a couple in a month to try and get a few more through within that financial year, if there happens to be a little bit of money left. So you're never too far away from a meeting happening. It's just our ability as funding officers to be able to process everything and get them through. But as a simple answer, for Reaching Communities, so for the larger grants, if you allow in your head 6 months from the point you're applying, that'll give you a pretty good steer without making any promises. With Awards for All, it's roughly half that.
Lovely, thank you for that one, Mavis. Holly's got one.
Right, yes. So Holly's asking about the requirements for income that we might expect an organisation to have. With Awards for All, there isn't too much scrutiny. There are brand new organisations that are set up and they can get grants straight away if it fits our eligibility criteria and if it's felt that it's the right project for us to be supporting. We do feel with Reaching Communities, because we're dealing with larger amounts of money and quite often for longer periods of time, that we prefer there to have to be some sort of track record. So we wouldn't necessarily be looking at a specific amount that an organisation would need to have previously been handling. However, if an organisation has had a couple of years in existence and has been maybe had an income perhaps of £10,000 each of those years, but then comes to us asking for £100,000 for the next couple of years, we're probably going to struggle to say yes to that, simply because that is irresponsible of us really to enable an organisation to grow that quickly. And there can be cases where I mentioned the possibility to help an organisation develop, where we would say, well, let's support you for a single year with a smaller amount to grow from where you are to a point where perhaps then we can say, right, let's now look at another 5 years with more money each year because you've demonstrated to us that you can do it for 1 year with a slightly smaller amount than perhaps you wanted. There are also questions about enabling an organisation to go from working with just a couple of people and maybe a couple of volunteers to suddenly saying we're going to employ 4 people there needs to be some sense that an organisation has the capacity to be able to deliver and manage what it says it's going to do, and be that employing people, be that managing a grant of a certain size. But always worth saying, every case is different, so we can have conversations about specifics and as it relates when it comes along.
Great, thank you for that question, Holly. So Chris has got a good one about reserve levels.
We were very interested in knowing about reserves through the pandemic, because part of our response was about emergencies and about organisations that were perhaps going to completely collapse due to lack of income, and whether the reserves that they had would be able to ensure they didn't, and whether they therefore absolutely needed our support. Sorry, a bit of noise is off. But again, if we do look at an organisation's financial situation when we're making our final decision, but sometimes not in as much detail at the first initial idea stage, because more interested in what you're doing and why you're doing it. Although we will sort of check to see whether you're sort of a set up in a way that means it's worth us carrying on with you. But we will look at reserves. And if we feel that there seems to be a large amount of money already there in the reserves, then we will question that and why perhaps that can't be used to do what you want to do. If you're operating without reserves, then we may ask why it is that you have got yourself, and you've got a reserves policy that says you should have X, why you've got yourself into the situation where you don't have what you policies say you're going to have. So we do certainly look at that, but there isn't a hard and fast rule as to what we expect an organisation to have. Again, case by case, I would say.
Thank you very much. Now, Phil's got a question about whether there are constraints on applications from a religious organisation as compared with a secular one.
Depends entirely on what the funding is being sought to do. So we absolutely, and in the what we can't fund list, I'm sure it's there, we can't. So for example, with a religious organisation, we can't fund anything that has religious content. We have to remain removed from that. But there are many activities that take place within places of worship that we can fund, and therefore things that we can help with within a building of that nature that we could get involved with. There are many activities run by religious organisations that actually are not religious in their content, or don't have a religion within their content, which would be okay for us to fund. So again, case by case. And it's worth mentioning, alongside religious organisations and places of worship, if we think about things that might happen at schools, or projects that might come via local authorities, or from perhaps health-related organisations, so perhaps NHS organisations, we cannot support anything that is that might be considered statutory, for example. We can only get involved with things that are additional to what might be expected to already be happening within that environment or by that organisation.
Thank you very much for that question, Phil. Any more questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Matt, for that talk. It's great that people can phone you and have a chat to you. Maybe something is going to be phoning you. That is a really useful way to get your project going, to make sure it is something the lottery will fund. So thank you everyone very much for joining us today. The session is going to be uploaded onto the Northamptonshire Council's website, so you can listen to it again at your leisure. And if you could please remember to complete the online questionnaire and include your email address if you'd like to be entered into the prize draw, that would be great. So lovely to see all of you, and take care. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.